Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. In the summer of 1990, a terrifying crime would take place in southeastern Florida. However, what started out as an investigation into a seemingly senseless act soon led to a much bigger and more baffling mystery, one involving dozens of fraudulent identities, bizarre disguises, and multiple locations across the world. This is the story of one of the most terrifying con artists ever to have lived, and the terrible crime that ultimately led to her downfall. As always, if you enjoy our videos, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel. And if you've watched a few of our videos already, you might not even realize that you're not subscribed. With that out of the way, this is the story of the Chameleon Killer. In early July of 1990, 34-year-old Beverly McGowan took out a newspaper ad in the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. She was looking for a roommate to share her Pompano Beach condo located in a small townhouse community on South Flagler Avenue. The ad read, "Share 2-bed, 2-bath condo, female 34 plus 2 cats, $290 plus half utilities." While Beverly interviewed several people who responded to the ad over the next few days, one person quickly stood out. She introduced herself as Alice. Alice was about 10 years older than Beverly and had all the hallmarks of a successful career woman. She dressed well, drove a nice car, and seemed responsible and independent. Beverly was immediately impressed by her confidence and charisma, traits that only seemed to be amplified by her refined British accent and the intelligent way that she spoke. Alice told Beverly that she worked for IBM back in England, and that she had come out here looking for a place because she had been transferred to Fort Lauderdale. The women immediately hit it off, apparently bonding over, among other things, their mutual interest in New Age philosophy. When Beverly offered Alice the room in her condo, she excitedly told her friends and family. She also mentioned that Alice was into numerology, a pseudo-scientific practice that purports that there is divine or mystical knowledge that can be garnered from studying numbers and the way they relate to a person's life. Beverly said that Alice had used numerology to predict a bright future for her, saying that she would be wealthy, have no worries, and would meet the man she would marry when she turned 40. Sadly, this prediction would prove to have a disturbingly short and inaccurate shelf life. Just a couple of days after Beverly announced that she was getting a new roommate, friends and family started to grow concerned about her. No one seemed to be able to get a hold of her, and she likewise hadn't been seen at her job at the Glendale Federal Bank, where she worked as a loan officer. On July 20th, 3 days after she had last been seen, Beverly's sister, who lived in Boca Raton, called the Pompano Beach police to report her missing. That very same day, her worry only deepened when she received a bizarre letter. The letter appeared to have been sent by Beverly, but was strangely postmarked from Miami. Even more mysterious than that was the letter's contents. It explained that Beverly was unhappy with her life and was making a change. She said that she had quit her job, sold her condo, and was planning to travel for a while. It turned out that a few more of these letters had been sent to Beverly's friends and family members, all with a nearly identical explanation for her sudden absence. The bank she worked for also received a letter notifying them that she was quitting, and Beverly's mortgage company got a telegram authorizing them to foreclose on her condo and dispose of any of her personal belongings. Needless to say, this all seemed wildly out of character for Beverly to all those that knew her, though the handwriting in all of the letters appeared to be her own. When a search of Beverly's condo was conducted, nothing initially appeared to be out of the ordinary. In fact, with the exception of her car, her cats, and Beverly herself, things seemed to be just the way that they always were. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that Beverly's phone had been disconnected, and identifying documents such as her birth certificate and passport were missing. But on the whole, it was as if the 34-year-old had just stepped out to run a few errands and had planned on coming right back. Despite finding no obvious signs of trouble at her condo, Beverly's family were convinced that there was something sinister about her disappearance. A worry that was soon substantiated by a horrifying discovery. On July 19th, the day before Beverly's friends and family received the bizarre letters, a construction worker went to a drainage canal about 100 miles away from Pompano Beach in St. Lucie County, roughly 10 miles west of Fort Pierce. He was there looking for some bait he could use for bass fishing, when he stumbled across what appeared to be a bag of rags halfway down the canal embankment. However, when the man got a little bit closer, he recoiled in terror. It was actually a body. When investigators arrived at the scene, they realized that the construction worker had discovered the remains of a woman, though it was obvious that whoever had left her there did not want her to be identified. The unknown victim had died from knife wounds to her throat, and her hands and part of her head had been removed. An area had also been cut just above her waist, where detectives theorized that she had likely had a tattoo before. Despite these chilling attempts to conceal the victim's identity, the killer had missed something important: a second tattoo of a small yellow flower on one of her ankles. This, combined with a portion of jawbone and teeth that had been overlooked by the suspect, soon allowed detectives to make a positive identification. These were the remains of Beverly McGowan. Around the same time that Beverly's remains were identified, investigators made a series of additional discoveries. Her car was found abandoned at a motel near Miami International Airport. The vehicle had been there for at least 5 days by the time police recovered it, and fibers from what appeared to be a wig were found inside. A search of Beverly's financial records yielded further clues. It turned out that $795 of the $800 in Beverly's bank account had been withdrawn, and her credit cards had been used to buy various items at the Aventura Mall, roughly 20 miles north of Miami. Crucially, these purchases had been made after Beverly would have already been dead. When police interviewed people who had interacted with the person who had used Beverly's credit cards, they described the suspect as an attractive, well-dressed blonde woman. Transaction records further revealed that Beverly's cards had also been used to purchase a ticket for British Airways Flight 292. As a side note, sources seem to disagree here as to whether the plane departed on July 22nd or 23rd. Regardless, that ticket had been purchased from a travel agent working at Thunderbird Travel in North Miami Beach, who gave a very different description of the suspect. The travel agent described the person they interacted with as a man who appeared to be dressed in women's clothing, complete with a dark-colored wig. The person also purchased an Avis car rental voucher for Heathrow Airport in London, presenting Beverly's credit card and driver's license during the transaction. In the aftermath of these discoveries, 2 police sketches were created of the suspects, one of the mysterious blonde woman, the other of the dark-haired man who had supposedly been posing as a woman. Initially, investigators theorized that the mysterious blonde woman might be 31-year-old Laurencia Bambi Bembenek, a woman convicted of murdering her husband's ex-wife in 1981. Bembenek had escaped from a prison in Wisconsin just 2 days before Beverly McGowan went missing, and it was thought that she resembled the descriptions of the blonde woman seen using Beverly's credit cards at Aventura Mall. Adding further weight to this theory was that Bembenek was known to have been traveling with her new fiancé, Dominic Guglielmo, while on the run. This seemed like it could explain the interaction at the travel agency, and why the wig hairs had been found in Beverly's car. However, this theory fell apart in October, when Bembenek and Guglielmo were eventually tracked down in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Hotel records and eyewitness descriptions of the pair confirmed that it would have been impossible for them to be in Florida at the time of Beverly's murder. At that point, they were definitely in Canada. Despite the setback, there was one other obvious suspect that investigators had also turned their attention to by this time: the mysterious woman named Alice, who Beverly had interacted with just days before her murder. When the detective went through the list of names of people Beverly had interviewed as potential roommates, Alice's was the only one that didn't check out, and she was the only person who didn't seem to have provided Beverly with a last name or phone number. When police contacted IBM to ask about recent transfers to their offices in Fort Lauderdale, they not only said that there was no one from England or named Alice that had been sent over, but that the offices weren't even located where the mysterious woman had claimed. Detectives now had their prime suspect, though tracking her down would prove to be a much more difficult task. When investigators checked the passenger manifest of British Airways Flight 292, there were no tickets listed under Alice or Beverly's names, but they were sure that their suspect had been on board because someone had come to pick up the rental car that had been arranged at Heathrow Airport. This person had attempted to use Beverly's credit card once again in order to redeem the voucher they had purchased, though by this time the card had been reported stolen, and the person instead chose to pay in cash. Things got even more confusing when investigators learned that no one could seem to agree on the description of the suspect who had picked up the car. Had this been the mysterious blonde woman calling herself Alice? Or was this the unidentified man who had been seen in the dark wig? Whoever they were, the suspect was now a continent away, leaving police back in Florida at a dead end. Desperate for any leads they could get their hands on, investigators reached out to the television program Unsolved Mysteries, who agreed to profile the case the following year. The 12-minute segment aired on November of 1991 and touched on all of the most baffling aspects of the case. The mysterious woman calling herself Alice, the supposed man in the wig who had purchased the rental car voucher, and the seeming senselessness of the terrible crime. Though the Unsolved Mysteries segment didn't expressly put forward a motive behind Beverly's murder, there was one particularly interesting piece of information it included that did seem to hint at one. During interviews with Beverly's friends and family, they offered further details about the numerology chart that Alice had created for Beverly. Importantly, Alice had apparently done 2 versions of the chart. It was during the creation of the second one in particular that Alice had asked for much more detailed personal information about Beverly, including her passport number, driver's license number, and details related to her birth certificate. It seemed that after some reservation, Beverly had handed this information over. Given that some of these very documents were found to be missing from Beverly's condo when it was later searched, and that her killer had taken significant measures to prevent her from being identified, it seemed that whoever had murdered her wanted more than just her money and credit cards. They wanted her identity. Unfortunately, though the Unsolved Mysteries segment succeeded in generating at least 500 tips on the first night of its airing, the mystery surrounding Beverly McGowan's death remained. It would take roughly 5 years before authorities would get their next big break in the case. In December of 1996, authorities announced that they had finally unmasked the woman known as Alice. She was a 54-year-old woman named Elaine Antoinette Parent. Investigators managed to link Parent through 2 major clues. The first came from the pad of stationery paper that had been used to write Beverly's letters to her friends and family. By examining imprints left both on the letters and the stationery pad itself, investigators were able to uncover the remnants of another letter that was written by someone else. The letter was to a British businesswoman that Parent was known to have lived with several years earlier in London. It turned out that this lengthy handwriting sample was actually a match to samples from several different documents that had been tied to aliases and stolen identities that were being investigated by the US State Department. One of those stolen identities was from a British woman named Sylvia Ann Hodgkinson. This proved to be the second and definitive link between Parent and the Beverly McGowan case. Hodgkinson's name was the one that Parent had traveled under on British Airways Flight 292 to escape to England back in July of 1990. The more authorities learned about Parent, the more unbelievable the story got, painting a picture of a calculating, intelligent, and terrifying con artist. As investigators unraveled the tangled web of Parent's past, they learned that she wasn't British at all. She had been born in the United States in the 1940s and grown up in New York, later relocating to Florida as an adult. She first fled to England in 1985 following her implication in a jewel theft, and upon arriving, started a new life in London. This is where she had met the British businesswoman who she had been romantically involved with and lived with. At the same time, Parent began to fabricate new identities and steal others, including Hodgkinson's. Using her natural charisma and intelligence, Parent would extract personal information from her targets, obtain documents in their names, and use them to rack up thousands of dollars in debt and commit other crimes. By the time her volatile relationship with the British businesswoman finally ended, Parent had plenty of different identities she could use to travel back to America, and so she did. When police finally caught up with the British businesswoman that Parent had lived with in London, they were far too late. Yes, she had taken Parent in again after she fled Florida in July of 1990, but this time had only stayed for a couple of months before things unraveled. By October of 1990, Parent had already gone back to the US, taking the woman's dogs with her in a failed ransom attempt. Parent had flown into California that time, still using Hodgkinson's identity, before heading back to Florida again in a rental car, which she never returned. Though Parent had been arrested in Dade County while driving the rental car with stolen plates in May of 1991, authorities were still years away from piecing together her true identity, and she was released. For frustrated investigators in 1996, that was where Parent's trail ended. Over the next few years, even more unbelievable stories about Parent would emerge as detectives continued to try and track down her aliases. Chillingly, as investigators worked their way down the ever-growing list of identities it was believed that Parent had created or stolen, it was soon discovered that many of these people could not be located. Though this obviously made sense for the cases where the identities had been entirely fabricated, there were several other people, including Sylvia Hodgkinson, who seemed to have disappeared entirely. However, unlike Beverly McGowan, no trace of them was ever found. Investigators began to speculate that Beverly may not have been Parent's first murder victim. One person who did turn out to be alive was a Florida woman named Charlotte Cowan. When investigators tracked Cowan down, she told them that she had met Parent in a bar in Orlando years earlier, right around the time that she had left England for the first time. Like Beverly, Cowan had been charmed by Parent's charisma and apparent sophistication, and Parent had used this to obtain several of her personal details using the numerology trick. However, rather than needing to secretly steal Cowan's identity, Parent had proved so persuasive that she had managed to more or less do it right out in the open. Several months after the women met, Parent fabricated a story about a sizable inheritance she was supposed to split with her brother because her aunt had died. However, she claimed that her brother had committed her to a hospital to keep her from getting the money. A short time later, Parent showed up at Cowan's house at 3 a.m, wearing a paste-on mustache. She claimed that she had used it as a disguise so she could escape from the hospital where she had supposedly been held against her will. Parent told Cowan that she needed her birth certificate so that she could get new identification and hide from her brother. And amazingly, Cowan handed it over. A few weeks later, Parent mailed the birth certificate back, having obtained all the documents she needed to successfully present herself as Cowan and continue to commit crimes. Though it's unclear if it was Cowan's story about Parent using the fake mustache that tipped them off, at some point, investigators seem to have come around to the idea that not all of Parent's aliases were women. It appears that around this time, they started to believe that there was no second suspect in Beverly's case. The so-called man in the dark wig had also been Parent. By 1999, investigators knew far more about Parent, though they still seemed no closer to catching her. Instead, they appeared to be stuck following an endless trail of aliases and random sightings, always with Parent one step ahead of the law. She ran a restaurant in New Mexico, worked as a store clerk at Sears in Tennessee, and was rumored to have been spotted in countries as far away as France, Turkey, Australia, and South Africa. Parent's uncanny and terrifying ability to evade the law eventually earned her 2 nicknames: the most wanted woman in the world and the Chameleon Killer. This latter nickname was apparently coined when Parent sent authorities in the US a picture of an oil painting of herself with the words, "Best wishes, your chameleon," written on the back. Finally, in April of 2002, nearly 12 years after Beverly McGowan's murder, Police got the lead that they were finally waiting for. When Parent was profiled on an episode of America's Most Wanted, authorities received a tip that she was living at a home on South MacArthur Avenue in Panama City, Florida. When police arrived at the residence a little more than an hour after that evening's 9 p.m. broadcast, a woman answered the door in her pajamas, identifying herself as Darlene Thompson. Pretending they were in the neighborhood because they had received a 911 call from the address and were just checking to make sure everything was okay, police asked if they could come in and speak with her. The woman agreed, but said she just wanted to quickly change and went into her bedroom. Police were almost convinced they had the wrong woman, until they heard a gunshot come from behind the closed door. Officers raced inside, but it was too late. The woman had shot herself in the heart and was dead. Fingerprints later revealed that it was indeed Elaine Parent. Because Parent took her own life before investigators ever got the chance to question her, it meant that many loose ends were never able to be definitively tied up, including Beverly McGowan's murder, which officially remains unsolved. Though given what we know about the case, it seems that Parent was almost certainly responsible for Beverly's murder. Other frustrating questions remain, such as what her exact motivations were, and why she resorted to such brutality in her killing. Also, while it's widely assumed that both of the suspects seen using Beverly's credit cards around the time of her murder were actually Parent, it seems totally possible that she might have had an accomplice. If true, that opens up an entirely new series of questions. Still other chilling mysteries remain, most notably what happened to Parent's other victims that couldn't be tracked down. It's believed that she used at least 20 different aliases, a handful of whom still apparently remain unaccounted for. Did these people meet the same grisly fate as Beverly? Or is there a different explanation? The terrifying truth is that we may never know. Given that it's now been more than 19 years since the Chameleon killer took her own life, and we don't appear to know any more information, it seems that whatever secrets she may have taken with her to the grave are destined to remain a mystery. Do you know of any other cases like this that you think we should check out? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.